recent years in the UK. And I think it's a combination of the style of the wines that are produced, but also the sort of quite romantic sounding name. Picpoul de Pinet has this lovely sort of, and easy for us Brits to say as well. So this is a lovely bright coloured pale white wine. I'm going to take a sniff. And the first thing that I can smell is slightly sort of citrusy, appley character, quite a restrained wine, maybe a little bit of herbs as well there. I'll take a taste now. The thing about Picpoul de Pinet, what makes it so unusual is this is a grape that retains both high levels of acidity, so it gives this lovely, refreshing, crisp quality, whilst at the same time retaining quite a full body. So this has quite a bit of texture to the wine, and that lovely soft texture supports that acidity. This is a wine that, in fact, like all of the white wines we're going to be trying this evening, is unoaked, has absolutely zero oak flavour. And actually the best Picpoul de Pinets tend to be unoaked in this fashion. They're very expressive, fruity, crisp, quite light, extremely dry wines. We categorise our wines on a scale of 1 to 9, which you can see here on the slide that's popped up. 1 being a bone dry wine and 9 being a lusciously sweet wine. And certainly this style of wine I would categorize, as very, very dry. So it's a wine that is really quite easy to drink, and also relatively easy to make. It's made by the talented Claude Jourdan, the family behind this Languedoc estate, and they are 2nd or 3rd generation of the family. So I hope if you are enjoying this, and if you've got any questions, we were going to sort of play this a little bit by ear. So if there are questions on this specific wine or on the specific wines as I'm tasting through them, by all means do post them, and Anna and the team will be able to field them. By all means, if there are questions that come to your mind that are nothing to do with the wine we're tasting, but just about wine in general or about tasting wines, enjoying wines, please do ask them. This is a great opportunity for you to feed into our quite passionate wine minds that we have here at the Wine Society. Any questions on that, Anna, that have come your way?
Not so far. So I think if we move on to the next, I'm sure once everyone gets their brains going and perhaps their taste buds flowing, then we'll get some more in. So happy to go on to wine 2 now, Pierre.
Okay, so wine 2. We'll spend a little bit longer on wine 2. Wine 2 is the Percheron Chenin Blanc Viognier 2019. And what we'll do with this wine is a little lesson in how to taste. There are 3 key things that you're looking for when you're tasting a wine, and that's the appearance, the colour, the nose, the aroma, and then the taste itself on the palate. In terms of appearance, the appearance of a wine can tell you quite a few things. It can tell you whether the wine is young, has the wine aged, is it a sweet wine or not. They tend to be more golden in colour. I'm not going to spend a lot of time during this tasting looking at the appearance, because all these wines are really designed to drink young, and they're designed in that way that actually the colour's not going to tell you an awful lot. It might tell you if the wine is faulty, but again, with these being under screw cap, that's fairly unlikely. So So that's the appearance. One of the questions you often get about appearance is again, I don't think I'm not sure you'll see this on the screen, but the what's called the legs or the tears that gather on the side of the glass. And those legs or tears actually can be an indicator of alcohol level. So the more the legs, usually the higher the alcohol. The next element to tasting a wine, the second element, is nosing a wine. And it's interesting because we call this process wine tasting, but actually the nose really does take center stage, because it's the nose that can smell an infinitely more number of different flavor characteristics than the actual palate. So taste buds can efficiently separate elements like sourness, bitterness, sweetness, and dryness. But in terms of the flavor characteristics, it's actually up here in the nose where we as humans sense flavor. Hence why so much attention is paid to the aroma of a wine. The first thing to do is not to swirl the wine. Before you swirl the wine in the glass, just take a sniff of it and just record and memorize what that smells like. Now, the reason that I don't swirl at first is because you can get quite different volatile compounds from a wine when it's sat in the glass versus after it's been in the glass and swirled around. So with this, I'm getting some slight tropical flavors. Now, to swirl, you want to move that wine as much as you can around the glass. If you're struggling to do it like I am, just put the glass on a flat surface and do it like that, moving it on the flat surface. And the more you practice that, it won't be long until you'll be a master at picking the glass up off the flat surface and spinning the wine in the glass. So you give it a good old swirl and then inhale. What that does is it intensifies the aromas. And actually you're getting really quite a strong tropical character coming through on this. Also a slight spice note. And that sort of spicy character I associate with Viognier. Now, the next element, we've taken a whiff, we've smelt the wine. I think we're saying it's probably a tropical flavored wine. It's got some sort of richness or intensity to it. The next job is get the wine onto our palates. Now, in the mouth, there are different elements in the mouth that are sensitive to different components in the wine. So the first component that the palate can do is it can register sweetness, acidity, bitterness, and saltiness. And these are all in different parts of the mouth. So sweetness, for example, you pick up at the tip of your tongue, acidity on the side of your cheeks. So hence, when we put the wine into our mouth, we want to swirl it as much as we can around the palate, and also then breathe in oxygen, which again intensifies the aromas. Now, before I do it, the second thing that the taste on the palate tells us is it helps us measure the length of flavor of the wine. And that's something that you can't get from nosing the wine. And the length of flavor of a wine is a real indicator of the quality. So the longer the flavor lasts, the better the quality that the wine is. So once we've taken a taste of this wine, also record just how long that flavor lasts in the palate. So we'll give it a go. Oh, this is quite a different style of wine to the Picpoul. In fact, really good contrast between the Picpoul de Pinet. So if you are joining me with these exact two wines at the moment, hopefully you'll see those differences. This is a much richer, fuller, fatter style of wine, almost opulent in its texture. Hold on. Sorry, am I still here? Because
Yep, you're still there, Pierre.
my Zoom has just said it's going to sign me out. I hope it doesn't. I'm still here, yeah?
Certainly are, yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, my Zoom seems to be playing up a little bit. Right, carry on. Where was I? Yes, quite an opulent texture to this wine. It's got a sort of fatness and richness to it. And that fatness and richness is because the acidity is slightly lower, more moderate compared to the Picpoul de Pinet. It's also, I would describe this still as a dry wine. I think we categorize this as a 2 on the dry to sweetness scale. So it's still technically dry, but perhaps not as austere as the first wine. It's got that same kind of tropical fruit flavor, that kind of exotic twist to it. It's quite a fascinating wine blend. This Chenin, Blanc, and Viognier are not traditionally blended grape varieties. There are no classic regions in Europe that do this blend. Chenin Blanc is the grape of the Loire Valley, and also South Africa, where this comes from. And Viognier is a grape that's grown quite widely around the world, but its home is really in the Rhone Valley in France. But actually, it's quite a smart little combination, a smart blend, because Chenin Blanc, what Chenin has is really crisp levels of acidity, and that offsets what can be sometimes quite a flabby character that you get from Viognier. I think this is showing really well, actually. It's got that lovely, satisfying quality to it, with quite a modest length of flavor. This is the sort of wine that you could drink as an aperitif, but I think it would be quite a versatile wine. Well, it would go with quite a number of different dishes. It would be ideal as a sort of barbecue style wine. I can see why this is a member's favourites wine. I think it would please lots of different palates, fussy palates, but also palates that just like to enjoy a good glass of wine. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
I think so. I think we're fired up for, I know a few people have the Sauvignon Blanc this evening, so that would be fantastic if we're ready to move on to the Stoneburn. Thank you.
So Stoneburn Sauvignon, which we have here. Another screw cap. Actually, it was the New Zealanders, the Kiwis, that really are responsible for screw cap becoming such a phenomenon that it has become, partly out of a willingness and an intent to prove that the cork quality, actually a lot of the corks that were being shipped down to New Zealand, the quality was really, really poor. So a lot of the wines in the early years that were being bottled under cork from New Zealand either aged quite variably, or they had high levels of corky taint. And so the Kiwis decided, they went out first under actually Michael Brakovic from Kumu River, who's a great producer of Chardonnay. They decided to be the first to, as an industry, join up and bottle the majority of their wines under screw cap. And Sauvignon Blanc is an ideal grape variety to put under screw cap because it's such a lovely, expressive wine to be able to enjoy. So let's go back to the how to taste. Look at the color. It's a slightly paler color to the previous wine we had. It's almost water white. This is typical of Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. We'll take a whiff. Now, that wine really jumps out at you in the glass without me having to even agitate it in the glass. It's very, very expressive, almost pungent in its character. Give it a swirl. It's got that lovely sort of grassy quality, hints of gooseberry, very, very intense aromas, really strong and powerful. I think even the most modest of wine tasters would be impressed with a wine like this, because it really is speaking loud. It's really, you know, if this was music, the volume would be on sort of right up there to sort of full strength. Now we'll have a taste. It's juicy, succulent, that juicy quality coming from the high levels of acidity. This has a little bit more sugar. It's still technically dry. I think we categorize this, I believe we categorize this as a 2 on our sliding scale. But I could also see, for me, this is between a 2 and a 3, probably 2.5. The key to good quality Marlborough Sauvignon is they retain a little bit of sugar to offset what is very, very high levels of acidity. So you get this combination of a refreshing, crisp, lively drink, but with that little touch of sugar that doesn't make it austere. But as I said, it's still a dry wine. This is unoaked, of which most Marlborough Sauvignons are. This is made by Jane Hunter, who are one of the most established producers in Marlborough. They were amongst the first sort of the sort of pioneering group in Marlborough to start producing Sauvignon Blanc. They are suppliers that go a long way with the wine side. So we've been working with Jane for many, many years. She also supplies us with our exhibition label, Sauvignon Blanc. I know that some of you are also tasting the Rive Sauvignon, because that was also in the members' favourites mixed case. In terms of how this contrasts or compares with Rive, they're relatively similar. They've got that similar sort of citrusy gooseberry character. The Rive is perhaps a little richer and a bit fuller than the Stoneburn. Stoneburn is a typically Jane Hunter style of Sauvignon, where she looks for a little bit more restraint in her Sauvignon Blancs. This I said was unoaked. I've just seen a question pop up, something about oak, but I missed it. I think it was there?
Yeah, we've had a question from Jane Baker. We've actually got a few questions on this, Pierre, but she has asked from Jonathan Batchelor. Pierre commented that it is not oaked. Is Sauvignon often oaked, or I would question ever oaked?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Sauvignon does come in oaked styles. The majority of Sauvignon that is bought, consumed, is mostly unoaked. So the kind of two key styles of Sauvignon Blanc in the world are essentially the Loire style, epitomized in Sancerre, Pouilly-Fumé, Touraine in the Loire. Those Sauvignons are mostly unoaked. And then the other distinct style is the Marlborough New Zealand style, again, mostly unoaked. The other style, which sort of sits in between the two, is Bordeaux. So Sauvignon Blanc is, along with Semillon, the main grape varieties that are used for white Bordeaux. White Bordeaux is most commonly oaked. Not all of it is, but the majority is, particularly from the Grave and Pessac-Léognan appellation, just near to the city of Bordeaux itself. They tend to be oaked, but they are rarely oaked to the extent that, say, Chardonnay is. So it might be a small percentage of the wine is barrel fermented in oak or aged in oak. The thing with Sauvignon Blanc is it has such a delicate structure. It requires quite special circumstances or conditions for it to support oak aging. That happens in Bordeaux, in some instances in the Loire, and in some instances in Marlborough and around the world. But it's a smaller percentage. The Wine Society, I think if you're looking for an oakier style of Sauvignon, go to our Bordeaux section. We do, off the top of my head, I can't think what other oaked Sauvignons we have from around the world, but I know that we do sometimes buy the grey wacky wild Sauvignon Blanc, which is from Marlborough. That has an element that is oaked. So does Dog Point's Section 94 have an element that's oaked. So within the New World, quite often the top wines from a Sauvignon producer will have an element of oak. It's so difficult to get the oak aging done in an effective way with Sauvignon that more often than not, we're often disappointed by the quality of those oak aged Sauvignons that come from the New World, and actually prefer the unoaked ones. So that's a very, very long answer to that question.
Thank you. I've got a couple of other questions as well, if you don't mind. The first one is mainly around what makes New Zealand Sauvignon so distinctive. So John Elliott has asked, he's heard a rumour it's because the air is clearer and there's less pollution. And he also does confess that he generally doesn't like the taste of New Zealand Sauvignon. But what is it that makes it so characteristic and so recognisable?
That's a really great question. So it's there is something about it's not quite the air, but there is a theory. So Marlborough has some of the highest sun hours of any wine region in the world. So the ultraviolet light in Marlborough is incredibly intense. So there is a theory that because of that high intensity of ultraviolet light, that impacts the characteristic of the grape variety. I don't think it's proven, and to be honest, I'm not an expert in that area, but that is a theory. The other element that contributes to this distinctive New Zealand style is simply because the climate is quite cool. The wines, as I said earlier, do retain the very, very high levels of acidity. So to make them palatable and pleasurable, producers do retain higher levels of residual sugar in New Zealand Sauvignon than producers do, say, in the Loire. And so that combination, along with the high sun hours, results in this very sort of expressive, overt style of Sauvignon Blanc with that little bit of sugar. So that's my theory. I don't know if we've got any New Zealand Sauvignon winemakers coming up on our Zoom events, but if we have, we should ask some of our winemakers. The chances are if you've got 6 Sauvignon winemakers in a room and ask them the same question, they'd all have a different answer anyway.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've heard all sorts of old wives' tales, and reality is it's probably a combination of the both of several factors, isn't it? But I do have one more quick question before we move on. I'm going to combine two questions, if it's all right, Pierre. Some members have spotted that that wine is no longer available.
Yes.
They've asked, will it be back in stock? And how much would it have been? And then I'd like to ask, can you offer an alternative for now, whilst it isn't in stock?
Yeah, so we do have it in stock, but currently all of the stock is available only in the members' favourites mixed case. One of the impacts of the pandemic and the situation that we're in is that some of our categories, members have bought incredible. We've had incredible demand for certain categories, and one of those categories has been Sauvignon Blanc. Sales of Sauvignon have gone absolutely crazy during this crisis. I think also impacted by some of the lovely weather we've been having. So that's why we are out of stock of the Stoneburn. If you order the members' favourites case, though, it will come in the members' favourites case. We will be getting. We're on the cusp of the new vintage of Marlborough Sauvignon. So they finished harvest sort of March, April time. We're going to be shipping the new vintage soon. So we're just at a decision point where we might ship some more of the 2019, but we're waiting to taste the 2020. And if the 2020 is significantly superior than the 19, we would move to the 2020 quicker, because Marlborough Sauvignon, the best time to drink that is when it's as young as possible. We can follow up that though with a much more comprehensive answer, because again, I don't have all the details in front of me. We've got. I can look up separately on our forecasting to see exactly when the 19, if the 19's coming in, and if it's not, when the 20's coming in. The price of this wine, I think, is about £8.50 or £8.95.
£8.50, yeah. £8.50 is what we've got here. Obviously, not necessarily the same for the new vintage, but what this was selling at was £8.50.
Yeah, so at the moment on our website, we've got a wine called Zephyr, which is about 50p more, or maybe £1 more, which is very similar. But actually, what I would do is I would wait, because next week we are going to be making several new wines available on our website, because we are about to announce the winning wines of our big blind tastings that we managed to do before lockdown, called Wine Champs. And within that, there are a couple of Sauvignon Blancs, and there's a brand new one that Freddie has brought in that he hasn't started selling. We all tried it. This was all blind, by the way, and it won Wine Champs, and that's called Grove Mill, I believe. Is it called Grove Mill? I think it's called Grove Mill. But again, can we send a follow up? We can send a follow up, can't we, Anna?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's called Grove Mill. But in any case, we can send everyone a follow up that's logged in to watch this. But that will be available next week. And that actually is a replacement for one of our most popular New Zealand Sauvignons called Wither Hills, that we'd worked with for many, many years, and stopped working with them just at the end of last year. So Freddie went out to find a replacement to Wither Hills, and it was this wine that happened to win Wine Champs. It's absolutely delicious. I'm going to be buying some when it's available next week to buy.
Sounds like a serious insider secret there. So we'll see how much of that's left in 2 weeks' time. Thank you, Pierre, for that. I think we're probably ready to move on to the reds, if that's okay. And do feel free to continue to comment on the chat section with any questions. If you do have any questions about the wine this time, we will try and unmute you. but alternatively, if you'd rather I ask the question, please just send it to me directly and say you'd like me to ask.
Anna, just as a thought, actually, so that we don't have to keep people waiting, if Tim is holding the sort of technical controls for the Zoom event, he might be able to access some details on the Wine Champs offer, and in that, if he could correct me, because I'm fairly sure I've got that name wrong, Grove Mill. I don't think it's called Grove Mill, but I would like.
I'll have a look for you now.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Right. So let's. Here we go. Next wine. My God, this has got a busy label. There we go. This is Côte de Rhone. That's the front label there, actually. Côte de Rhone, Rive, Gauche, 2018. Another screw cap. So let's have a look at the wine. It's bright, it's clear, medium intensity of color. Give it a smell. Wow. Okay, the very, very first thing that I'm getting on that is pepper, black pepper. But it's not particularly expressive. So we'll agitate the wine in the glass, amplify those aromas. Okay, some sort of red berry fruit here. Maybe plummy. So sort of red berry, peppery fruit. Again, no oak here at all. This is just pure, simple, fruity wine. We'll give it a taste. Now, the first thing to say, the difference between a red wine and a white wine, when you taste it, is that white wines don't have this, red wines do, which is tannin. And tannin is the sort of drying effect you get on your gums. Tannin comes from the skins of the grapes. It also comes from oak. This is a wine that is made of two grape varieties, Grenache and Syrah, which is a typical blend of Côte de Rhone, the southern part of the Rhone. It's made up with majority Grenache. Grenache has quite low tannin. So whilst this does have some tannin, actually the tannins are quite subtle, they're quite light. The body of this wine, though, this is a really big, full-bodied wine. It's 14.5% alcohol. When you taste this, after you swallow it, or if you spit the wine out, you'll sense some heat down in your throat. And it's the alcohol that is giving you that sensation of heat. So the higher the alcohol, the hotter a wine is. This is, as I said, 14.5% alcohol, so it's a big, big wine. Interestingly, just while we're on alcohol levels, we often get asked about alcohol levels in wine. And actually, generally speaking, alcohol levels are rising in wine. And that's really a function of just better vineyard management around the world, where grapes are being more consistently ripened to very, very healthy levels. The important thing about alcohol, like anything in wine, is balance. So is that alcohol in balance with the fruit, or does it take away from the experience of the wine? Because you can have wines that are 10% alcohol that are out of balance, and you can have wines that are obviously 14-15% alcohol that are out of balance. But you get the same wines that can be in balance at those alcohol levels. So that leads me actually nicely on to, I promised to give you a tip about writing the perfect tasting note. And that tip is called Blick, B-L-I-C. And Blick stands for the B for balance, L for length, I for intensity, and C for complexity. And you can apply Blick to any wine that you try. And try it out because it's fascinating. You really can impress people. Just try a wine and you can say, no, this is a wine that it's quite harmonious. It's got really good balance. The length of flavor is modest, but with some really good intensity. And the complexity, well, there's characters of black pepper and there's red fruit here too. There you go. You just sound like a pro. Blick. It's very good. We all use it in the trade. When I was studying the Masters of Wine and doing the tastings for the Masters of Wine, we all used Blick, and we managed to pass those tastings using Blick. It's a cracking thing. I think it works really well. Now, quickly back to this Côte de Rhone. So this is quite a charming wine, fruit packed. It comes, as I said, from two of the key grape varieties, Grenache and Syrah. Our website says Mourvèdre as well. I think there might be a sprinkling of Mourvèdre in this wine too. And in terms of the sort of pyramid of quality here in Côte de Rhone, so Côte de Rhone is sort of the first level of quality. And then a step up is Côte de Rhone Village, where the wine comes from one of the specific communes that have qualified as village status. There are quite a few of those. There are about 80 different communes. And then right at the top of the Côte de Rhone pyramid are specific appellations in the south of southern part of Rhone, like Vaccarat and Gigondas. This, though, is really a simply made, no-nonsense red wine that does retain that lovely sort of peppery and that kind of Mediterranean punch and power that certainly members of the Wine Society would expect from Côte de Rhone.
So Pierre, I have also, whilst you're smelling and nosing, I have answered the question, and it is indeed Grove Mill. It is Grove Mill, you remember correctly. So not released yet, but it will be released for members who are interested, and we will include it in the follow-up email.
Yeah, I think it's released next week, and it's very good. Mrs. Mansour is addicted to Marlborough Sauvignon, and if anyone's got any tips as to how I can get her off Marlborough Sauvignon, please send them this way. I've tried everything, but she adores Marlborough Sauvignon, and I know she's going to love Grove Mill. It's that sort of flavour that she adores. So if you like Marlborough Sauvignon, it's a terrific wine. Okay.
So, would you mind if I asked a question, Pierre? We've just got a question from Mike Locke. Mike, I think we're going to try and unmute you, but do feel free to unmute yourself if not. We have a question that I think is probably quite relevant, particularly to Côte de Rhone wines, but is across all of them. Hi, Mike.
Hi, am I coming through?
Certainly are.
Yeah.
Oh, great. It's a great event, by the way. I'm enjoying it no end and learning stuff. Thank you. One thing that my old man used to do was religiously open the wine and allow it to breathe. And he said that this worked both for what he termed as good wines. I mean, he was a Wine Society member for decades, which is where I got my share from, but also for cheap and cheerful. Open it up, decant it, give it a swirl, it'll always taste better. Now, that's not something that I particularly bother with. And I noticed none of the wines on this tasting have been opened and allowed to breathe. So I'd just be interested to know what a proper master of wine thinks, and I'll learn from that.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's a good question. You're right. Specifically didn't decant any of these wines. I think it goes back to what the wine's designed for. So the wines tonight are designed, you know, to be on your rack in your kitchen, in your cellar, and almost opened without thinking about them. So they should be ready to go once you've cracked open the wine. Now, having said that, if we just focus purely on red wine here, because in general it's red wines that benefit from being decanted. Now, you decant a wine for two reasons. One is to remove any sediment that might have developed in a wine. Usually that happens in wines that have been aged for several years, where that sediment forms. Wines designed to drink every day, usually, even if you did age them, they're not going to taste better, but even if you did age them, they're unlikely to develop sediment. The second reason that you decant a wine is to aerate it, to introduce oxygen. It's kind of why you swirl the wine in the glass, is to amplify those characteristics. Your father was absolutely right, though, with even everyday drinking red wines, they will generally benefit from being open an hour or two earlier. A lot of people have said to me, you know, I opened a bottle on Monday night, we had a couple of glasses, we put the cork back on, went back to it on Tuesday or Wednesday, and it was so much better. And that's usually, and that is because the wine has had time, the oxygen has opened the wine up. So it definitely doesn't harm a red wine to aerate it, whether it's inexpensive or top end. White wines, I wouldn't decant. There are exceptions. Some top white Burgundies do benefit from being decanted. But yeah, so with red wines, certainly. The other thing as well, actually, it's worth mentioning with reds that are bottled under screw cap. Screw cap is a very, it's such a tight closure, tighter than cork. And tight in the sense of being inert, doesn't let any oxygen in at all. And that can sometimes cause a problem that's called reduction. Reduction is the opposite to oxidation. It's when wine doesn't have enough oxygen, it reduces, and reduction expresses itself in a slightly sort of eggy character. It smells a bit eggy, a bit sulfurous, a bit sulfide-y. And that's quite common, can be quite common in screw cap red wines. The way to get rid of reduction is to decant, to literally oxygenate the wine, and that whiff will go away. Hope that helps. Does that answer your question?
I think that was fab. Thank you very much. I hope that did answer your question, Mike. Yeah, we got the thumbs up from Mike. So I think, Pierre, if you're happy to move on to the fifth and final wine.
Sure.
I know that we have a few members who've opened up the Foundstone Australian Merlot this evening.
There we go. So Burton Vineyards are behind Foundstone. They are based South Australia, and this is a Merlot, which is, it's quite unusual to see a single varietal Merlot from Australia. More commonly you'd see in reds Shiraz or Cabernet and Shiraz blended together, Pinot Noir. Unusual to see 100% Merlot. So looking at the color of this compared to the Rhone, this is a much deeper, darker color. Suggesting that the fruit comes from a much warmer climate, where the skins are thicker, which contribute to the colour. Now we'll take a smell. So actually this is a wine, certainly my bottle today, it's quite closed. It's not jumping out. It needs it needs some air. Yeah, that's better. So this has got a touch of oak, which is giving it that's a slightly sort of spicy, not the same spice as the Cote de Rhone. This is more a sort of smoky, leathery, spicy character from the oak. And actually, on smelling it, it's not obviously Australian. It hasn't got that sort of sensuous, super ripe character that a lot of Australian reds have. I'll take a taste. Mm. Oh, it's good. It's plump, plummy. This has got more tannin than the Cote de Rhone. And that tannin is slightly, quite velvety. For me, this is a wine that would lend itself more to food than the Cote de Rhone because of that tannin and that sort of bitter quality. It's dry again. It's got really good length of flavour, and it's got power. Exactly what you'd expect of an Australian red wine. A bit of juiciness to it and good length. Yeah, that's showing well. This is, again, full-bodied wine. Amazing, because for me, I haven't tasted this wine many times. But for me, this is an interesting style of wine, because on the nose, it's not really jumping out at me, but on the palate, it's really going for it on the palate. This, to me, is what I would call a classic Wine Society members wine. And I tell you why I would call it a classic members wine. Members of the Wine Society have such a involved and experience with wine. And the majority of our members have been brought up on drinking the wines of the classic areas of Europe, where wine is in quality. And so quite often the popular wines from the New World that we list are wines that have a little bit of a nod to Europe. And I think this one does too. This is not an Australian Merlot or an Australian red that I would give to someone to say, here, if you want to test your blind tasting skills, this is what Australian reds are about. For me, this is a much more of a nod to Europe than being sort of overtly Australian. It's got an appetizing quality. It feels in balance, and lovely kind of food wine. Really enjoying it this evening. I think it's going well with the slightly cooler temperatures outside.
Funnily enough, I was actually going to ask you about temperatures. We have had a question in, what temperature would you serve these wines at?
Oh, okay. Well, I have to be honest. I'm not sort of black and white when it comes to temperatures. So with red wines, I really like to serve red wines at what I call just above cellar temperature. So they're slightly cooler than what you might get served in a restaurant. One of my beefs is when you go to a restaurant and they serve red wines that are almost, they're as warm as the kitchen. So I like my red wines just above cellar temperature. I don't know what that would be, about 15, 16 degrees. White wines probably around 12 degrees. Unoaked white wines cooler than oaked white wines. I prefer oaked white wines a couple of degrees warmer than unoaked white wines. One of the things that we enjoy a lot at home in these summer months when we're drinking red wine is we do enjoy drinking red wine slightly chilled, but only specific red wine slightly chilled. So Beaujolais, I just plonk into the fridge for about half an hour. Beaujolais, Gamay, Pinot Noir are great varieties that really lend themselves in red wine to being just slightly below room temperature.
Fantastic, thank you. We've had one, I think we can squeeze in one more question. It's sort of a starter question. Hopefully Jane Baker, you've literally just come in on the chat, so if you can unmute yourself, we haven't had a chance to unmute you yet, but if you are able, Jane Baker's iPad, to unmute yourself and ask your question. There we go, it looks like there's some action going on. There we go, you're unmuted. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Just wondering, with the Percheron, what food pairing would you suggest?
What food pairing with the Percheron?
Yes.
Oh, well, so if you've just joined, yeah, I remember when we tried that. Actually, I think this is going to sound like a rubbish answer, but it's one of those wines that I think is really, really versatile. It's a wine I think that will go with lots of different dishes. I think it would work as an aperitif as well, because it's got that nice sort of fatness of texture. Generally with a wine that's got that sort of heaviness, I quite like it with white fish, but sort of creamier white fish, quite strong flavored white fish. It would support good creamy dishes, chicken too. And the other thing that would work really well are cold meats, the sort of tapas style, anything that's salty would offset that wine really, really well.
Yeah, I've certainly enjoyed the Percheron with fish pie before. It was a lovely kind of creamy, rich, and then the nutmeggy flavors, that sort of aromatic sense of fish pie as well went really lovely with the Viognier. So there's a lot going on in that wine. So I think there's a lot to play with. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jane, I don't know whether you're still there, but if that's what you're drinking, what are you planning on eating with it? Perhaps it's not what she's drinking this evening.
Hi, yes, we are drinking it. It's a firm favourite of ours, and yes, so we should be having some fish with it.
Lovely.
Fantastic. Well, I think probably that's actually us right on the nose at 6 o'clock. Pierre, I'm imagining that if anyone else has any follow-up questions, you'd be happy to answer those over email as well, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
And then do let us know what you thought of the wines. If you've got any, if it's the first time trying them in particular, we'd love to hear what you think of all 5 of the wines. Pierre, do you have anything else to add?
Just remember Blick, balance, length, intensity and complexity. It will go a long, long way in impressing people. Even if you can't describe the wine, you don't know what the flavor is that you're getting in the wine, just use it and it makes you look good.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Pierre. Well, thank you everyone for joining. It's I hope you've had a lovely session this evening. It's our first of this kind of event, so we'd also love to hear your thoughts, so do let us know anything we can improve on or anything that you particularly enjoyed. We do have some more Monday sessions coming up, and they will be involving certain wines, and we'll share in advance, as much advance as possible, which wines those will be. And last but not least, I'd just like to thank Pierre for giving up his Monday evening and talking us through 5 absolutely gorgeous member favourite wines. So I hope you've all got some food in the oven perhaps, and a glass to go with it.
That's water. That's water.
That's not water. That's my water. Lovely. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and we hope to see you again next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Well done.
Bye.
Well done, guys.